Hello and welcome to the Empowered Learning Podcast. This is Andy Bennett. On today's episode, we welcome Daniel Archuleta. Daniel has over 20 years of experience in education and nonprofits. He co-founded Ideas, Inc. and most recently founded Surpassing Distinction, whose mission is to make a positive impact in addressing complex systems by partnering with communities and organizations who are committed to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Welcome, Daniel. Hey, Daniel, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Andy. Thanks for having me on.
Good. So we just met not too long ago, a couple weeks up in Colorado Springs at the CASB, Colorado Association for School Board Members. You were a vendor, I was a vendor. During our down times, right? We were kind of wandering around, meeting other folks, and I stopped by your booth, and I remember you had quite the snappy suit, which, you know, that's just doesn't really matter, but it did catch my attention, and stopped and chatted with you and your associate, and you had a pretty awesome vision and mission statement of what you're working on. So that's kind of how we got to know each other a little bit. And so I'm super excited to dive into Surpassing Distinction, what that means, what the vision of that is. But before we jump in too deep, I'd love to just give you an opportunity to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, just so they know who you are.
Oh, sure. Thank you so much again for this opportunity. A little bit about me. One thing that I love is when I run into people who are from out of state, because they always have the question, are you from Colorado, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I have to pull out a map and I say, here's Archuleta County. It's on the southern border of Colorado.
Right. Yep.
Yes, we were here. The Archuletas were here since before Colorado was Colorado.
Right.
But what that also means a little bit for me, every single one of our stories is generational, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my background, my story, Archuletas, they came in as Spanish conquistadors. It's not something I'm proud of, but it has helped drive my own personal mission,
right?
Which is to strive for equity, right? And to help the communities that are underserved and underprivileged. Right. This was reinforced by my dad. He was a nonprofit leader in Denver. He was one of the early members of UMass at CU Boulder. And it was that kind of dedication to his passion for learning, his passion for people, that instilled in me the same kind of mission and drive. And that's what took me into my career. And really the career started before I knew it was a career. I graduated from Adams City High School, one of the lowest performing high schools, from one of the lowest performing school districts in the state. I gave the concluding speech, and everything through it was about education reform. That was my message.
I love it.
So then I went to MSU, got my full ride to academic scholarship. I published 2 anthological pieces on Chicano topics that were used as curriculum pieces, as textbooks in the Chicano studies curriculum. I went and worked for Regis University, and I started out there under the teacher education program. Wonderful. And then we created the Office of Program Effectiveness and Assessment. That's where I found my professional passion in strategy. I got my MBA in strategic management through a tuition benefit. And then pathway into Cherry Creek Schools, Adams 14. I was actually given the ability to go back there and work for them as the manager of strategy and accountability. I've worked for collective impact organizations, and all of that experience, 20 years of experience in these fields, allowed me to kind of conceptualize a different approach, an innovative way of managing declining enrollment in school districts through community impact.
Interesting. Okay. Very cool. Wow, that's a lot. That's very cool. I was reading through your bio, which it'll be in the show notes for anybody that wants to read more. You hit on quite a few of the things there, but there was a lot of really cool pieces there. So I appreciate you hitting on a couple of those. I do know Archuleta County. That's just right up the road. I'm in Montezuma County in Southwest Colorado as well. So that's Pagosa Springs, right? Isn't in Archuleta County?
We're family. Absolutely.
There you go, man. I love it. I love it. Too good. So you mentioned a few of the kind of touch points along the way, and I don't want to dive too quickly into this, just because I think it's kind of fun to kind of go on the journey with you, right? Like what got you to this point. So maybe before we dive into Surpassing Distinction, what that means, what your vision is for that, tell me a little bit about. And you mentioned your dad was an inspiration in working towards equity and reform of education. do you recall any kind of turning point moment, kind of a shift where it's like, I see something wrong. I'm going to dedicate my life towards that. Was that early on? Was there an experience that kind of made that shift for you? What, any thoughts along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to say that happened very early on with just kind of the building blocks of my own personality, but also aligned to the values that I was receiving from my religious upbringing, as well as, of course, my both of my parents who sought to help and support neighbors, however, wherever they could.
Right.
I grew up the youngest of six.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
we grew up poor. My father wasn't able to complete his degree at CU Boulder,
Okay.
and spiraled into a life of criminal activity. He was
really? Wow.
a felon, and because of that, through my much of my childhood, he was unable to hold a steady job and be a provider for the family. So my mother actually started working in elementary schools. And I know firsthand, by being raised with a free and reduced lunch student,
Sure,
the inequities, right, the inequalities. And so when I they always say the grass is greener on the other side, right, or across the tracks. Well, I grew up in Commerce City. South Commerce City was covered in tracks, and when I went to the other side of the tracks, I'm like, boy, this is beautiful, right? this isn't so bad. I don't know what everybody's talking about.
That's funny.
So once I saw that, it really reinforced all of those values. In fact, when I went to MSU, the prodigal son, right, of I was trying to disprove everything that my father had taught me because I was tired of hearing about it.
Right.
And it was through my classes in poli-sci, through my classes in Chicano studies, and it was actually through my major in marketing, where every single class, every single day, every single line in a textbook reinforced all of the things that my dad was telling me.
Interesting.
And that really led to my entire career.
Very cool. Very cool. What that is quite the journey. Thank you for taking us on that. I mean, you mentioned the prodigal son. I guess you mentioned a little bit of the, you came in with, dad had taught this and you were kind of going to disprove that. I guess what, coming out of that experience, right, that, I remember the Bible story, right, that the father sees him from a long distance and kind of runs to him. Like what was your experience coming back after going to college, and how did you apply that? I guess what new thoughts did you bring? You did mention that some of those were confirmations of things that you had been taught before, but I'm sure you brought back new thoughts. I guess what were some new learnings that you applied to that effort coming out of college?
That's a great question. I think the only thing really that I saw differently was more of a systems perspective, more of a global perspective.
Right.
In my education, and I received a fantastic education from MSU. I was in the honors program. Most of my classes were taught by the deans and the chairs of the program, where we had 12 kids, right, and 12 students in the classes. So I had a really rich experience, and I love knowledge. So when I came home, the conversations that I had with my dad and with others was all about how it correlated with poli-sci, how it correlated with other pieces that I was getting education and my own experiences, right? With various friends all around, various socioeconomic groups, right?
Sure. Right.
And so it was a unique perspective, but I will share with you, Andy.
Okay.
Everything that I came back wasn't new. There were no new knowledge. I haven't invented anything, right? Everybody else, I stand on the shoulder of giants with any kind of concept I might develop. And so that was humbling. The biggest thing as the prodigal son to come back home is a humbling experience to go, I didn't know as much as I thought I did.
Right. That's awesome. Well, that's cool. And I mean, I have two boys in high school, and it's one of those things that's like, you can tell them over and over again, but sometimes they just have to learn it on their own, right? So maybe that was just one of those things like, I'll check back with you in a little bit, Dad. We'll see if you know what you're talking about. And sometimes they do. So that's awesome.
Right. You come back in the door, you're like, okay. I'm sorry.
All right. I love it.
I hope you have that experience with your
I,
sons
I
too.
I do as well. I do as well. I've got awesome kids, so I'm crossing
Good.
fingers, making prayers for sure.
Good.
You mentioned a couple different avenues or areas of teaching or areas of learning that you had gone through. Poli-sci, obviously education, some marketing. Those are some kind of disparate, kind of different approaches. If I drew a Venn diagram, I guess how would you see all of those um, contributing into what it is that you're doing now? I mean, that's a really cool mix. I'm very intrigued to see, kind of your thought process as to why you chose those studies and how that impacts, your point of view moving forward.
In a lot of my conversations recently with leaders across multiple sectors, we talk about how experiences have to pass through our own lens, right?
Yep.
And so I think that those, as you said, disparate, right, different experiences, it allowed me to increase the segments of my perspective, right? So
Okay.
so
Yeah.
if you're thinking about these Venn diagram or these segments that are added to a pie of the whole picture, right?
Sure.
What it allowed me to do is to see the world through multiple viewpoints, through multiple perspectives. But
Love
then
it.
ultimately, it's about self-identity. Ultimately, it's how I choose to perceive the world, given all of the inputs, and
Right.
that's difficult. That's very
Sure.
difficult. Identity and understanding and the ability to uh, uh, bring all of those pieces together so that it makes some sort of semblance of of sense
Right.
to us all, really only happened recently for me.
Okay. Wow. Very cool. Very cool. Well, like they say, it's a journey, right? We haven't arrived there. It's just, where are we at along the path? And I love going to conferences. I mean, obviously we're looking for customers, but you just meet such interesting people that are on, somewhat similar paths, right? But I mean, they're, your vantage point, your point of view, like you said, is very much different experiences. But we all have, a similar goal. We all want, in education improvement, reform. We just come at it from different angles. So it's always fun to, like you said, learn from other people and just kind of grow your network. So this is going to be a fun conversation. Absolutely. So let's dive into surpassing distinction. That was what kind of caught my eye and what we wanted to talk about. So tell us what you're currently working on and we can pull in some images when we need to. So you just let me know what makes the most sense to kind of paint the picture for our folks here.
Thank you. I really appreciate just the facilitation that you're providing
You
through
bet.
all of this. It
Absolutely.
helps me tell the story a little bit better. My mind kind of works in odd ways. I trust it. The people who I know trust it, but
Right.
sometimes it's a little scrambled, right?
It's all good. It's all good.
So Surpassing Distinction. We are a for-profit organization. Originally, it was solopreneurship. It started in 2017. We took on contracts typically from nonprofit organizations working within in the education sector. We've worked for CASE, the Colorado Association of School Executives. We've worked for Adams 14 after I had moved on from there. We've worked for Denver Public Schools, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But then we've also worked for collective impact organizations, primarily Rocky Mountain Partnership and Denver Metro Community Impact. And in both of those cases, they ended up hiring me on as in director roles, data director and then director of operations. And I went back to Surpassing Distinction. I said, this is that entrepreneurial part that I got from my dad, right?
Right.
And what I want to do is I want to help these underserved communities in a way that is mission driven, but
Okay.
from a for-profit perspective.
Okay.
When I was working, so DPS was the last contract that we had. I had data analysts and a few other contractors working on evaluation, project management, data dashboards. We were working on declining enrollment in the district, and this is a huge issue that's happening statewide. We looked at I would say 24 or more variables and data elements that we pulled together in order to try to explain what was happening in a dozen or so schools in the district and why they were experiencing declining enrollment.
Okay.
And it was through that work that I also met a few leaders in declining enrollment work, Dr. Mackenzie Kahn, namely, where I started to grow my own contextual understanding of what the problem was. And one thing that we found in the data was that it correlated most with population shifts, right? Okay. So anytime we were seeing declining enrollment in one of the schools, it also sat on an area where we were seeing population shifts and the causes of those, the roots of those. Actually, do you want to show the map?
Yep, you bet. The map first?
Yeah, let's take a look at the map, because I think that this illustrates to your subscribers, to your viewers, that this really is a statewide issue, right? So where you see the pink, where you see the red there, is where there's been shifts in population since the census in 2020 or 2010, right? And what you're seeing here is the percentage of those shifts over the last, I think the data goes up to 2021, if I remember correctly. And this is for children aged between, or residents aged between 5 to 19.
Okay, got it. School age kids, got it.
And so this really illustrates that this is not something that's just happening in urban areas, right? This is not something that is concentrated to one particular quadrant of the state.
Right.
And then when we started digging into it more, we started uncovering that the roots to these kinds of changes varied widely across the state and really nationally for any population shifts. Research suggests that these are due to low birth rates, right? Gentrification, racism, changes in the microeconomies, the macroeconomies, and it continues. The list is long with all of the possible root causes. And in all of those cases, though, school districts don't have the power, don't have the ability to eliminate those root causes.
Right.
And in all of my work with unified improvement planning, school districts, if they're going to take on an issue, the basic premise is don't take on one that you have no control over. Right?
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. And that's honestly when we were having and it was very brief, our conversation at CASB, that was one of my first things. It's like, as a former educator administrator, it's like, yeah, it's a problem, but what impact can I as a teacher or administrator in a district have on population decreases and this kind of stuff? So, which is why I was like, man, if you can crack that code and we can kind of work together on this to identify what that is and then have some solutions around that, that's brilliant.
Well, you're right. It's a growing crisis in Colorado. I think there was a school board member, I think this was published in the Colorado Sun a few months ago. A school board member for Poudre School District said that this was going to be an issue that's going to cost them tens of millions of dollars, right?
Wow.
And then in fact, if you want to, there was another graphic that I think you just pulled down. It was the triangle, right?
Okay.
So in my experience working with community members, if you can zoom in just to that triangle first.
That work?
A lot of the conversations that I witnessed districts having with community members who were seeing the declining enrollment, right, was the operational costs, so sustainability, versus the minimum educational quality standards that they needed to provide and that the parents demanded, right? It became a tug of war between those two issues, where once the community started talking about their own desires to say, these issues that we're dealing with that's causing the declining enrollment, it's bigger than just declining enrollment, right? These are because of, in one case, there was a rural district who said, oh, the gold mine closed.
Right.
That was the cause.
Sure.
So what is a school district to do when the gold mine is closed? But by creating another point on this for community desires, we now have the area, the space within that conversation to identify a compromise, right? To say, we need to bring in the district, we need to empower the district
Hmm.
to be a partner at the table,
Hmm.
as well as other organizations, nonprofit organizations,
Right.
foundations, city and local government agencies, state
Hmm.
agencies, to come in and look at a holistic solution by looking at the holistic problem.
Sure.
And unfortunately, that conversation really just hasn't. I haven't been witness to many of those. There
Hmm.
has been major successes in the state. The
Hmm.
Blueprint program in Aurora Public Schools
Hmm.
is an exemplar.
Mm.
Um, Edgewater Collective is doing great work with Colorado Gives Foundation. So there are exemplars across the state, but in general terms, I didn't see this in practice often.
Right. Okay. You had mentioned a community. I've got another one. Trying to grab all of the stuff going on here, right? There's so many good things here.
Oh, but this is a great system. I love what you
Isn't
have
this
developed
sweet?
there.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah.
Super fun here. You mentioned community. I wanted to just give you an opportunity if there was something you wanted to kind of talk about the community impact with that graph there. I wanted to give you opportunity to chat through that if you needed to.
Thank you, and I also want to let your viewers, your subscribers know that the work that we're doing right now, the contract with DPS has ended.
Mm.
They're looking at kind of doing a relaunch or thinking through that with the new board, of course, right?
Mm-hmm.
That makes
Sure.
sense.
Right.
But the work that we're doing right now, we're not. This is from the heart.
Okay.
We're not getting paid for this kind of work.
Gotcha.
So what we saw in the model and based on the collective impact work, by the way, James Roy II, he is the executive director of DMCI. He's on board with this. He and I are the ones who kind of built, and really it was a lot of his vision for this
Okay.
community impact model where we lift based on this pyramid, right?
Mm.
Lift community voice all the way up to the top. And we do that through community mobilizing organizations. We do that through local nonprofits. They're the ones who are closest in the community, right? They're
Right.
the ones who are going to engage. They're going to listen to the voice. And it's that voice that becomes a call to action.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that call to action that really drives all of those funnels, all of those resources
Mm-hmm.
into the community impact, into the benefit for
Right.
the community.
Gotcha. That's very cool. Very cool. I think another point that we had talked about in our brief conversation was this idea of government control, not government, sorry, district control and kind of like local control. And you had a really interesting take on that because for whatever, I won't get into my personal background, but there's you have good leaders. You have some leaders that are maybe not so good that maybe are not willing to work and listen to community members. So that was one of those initial, okay, that's a hurdle, right? I mean, a lot of these things are you have to have a joint effort to be able to tackle these big problems. So any thoughts on, I guess, gaining a partnership and a collaboration with superintendents or districts that maybe like some control? Thoughts on that?
Andy, I appreciate your memory so well.
Yeah.
This is great transitions here.
Yeah, it's all good.
So what we saw, and I also want to say that in presenting some of these concepts and presenting some of these ideas to CEOs of within the education sector who do advocacy and policy work, we suggested that some of the problem that's exacerbating the situation,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
Is exactly what you said, is that the district control over the management of the declining enrollment is sometimes an issue unto itself, right?
Sure.
Because of it forces them into a position where they are potentially seen as another oppressor for the community who's already experiencing these population shifts due to a myriad of issues or some that are just unique to them, right?
Sure. Yeah. Right.
Where they're coming in and saying, hey, we're going to have to close your school due to these sustainability issues.
Right.
What we suggest and would like to talk more about is this idea of pulling this out of the district's management by a third party, so that they can be held accountable by not only the superintendent, but by the board themselves.
Sure.
right? And then the board and the superintendent can work collectively, can work together to
Okay.
ensure that this other agency is, this other organization is meeting the needs of the community. And then the
Right.
major metric on that is going to be community satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
And so in presenting this to some of the organizations who I've been talking with over the past several months, they've even said, wow, this is a bright light in this concept. They hadn't considered that before.
Right. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
in this case, it empowers. Oh, sorry, Andy. I just want to
Mm-hmm.
say this empowers the district to
Mm-hmm.
be a partner
Okay.
in the solution.
Sorry, got squeaky there for a second. Empowers. And I think that was the part that resonated with me when we had this conversation. And I wasn't trying to shoot holes in your plan. It's just I was curious, right? Like how do you reconcile those two things? And I think the idea of let's shift it away from, like, rather than giving away power, we are working together. We are hey, looky here, empowered learning, right? That was I won't even pay you for that connection there. I loved it, Daniel. That's brilliant, right? It is a partnership, right? And when it gets away from partnerships, it is when ultimately the kids suffer, right? The education suffers at that point when there's one person calling the shots or whatever the case is. So not to get too far off that, but I just wanted to make mention of that, because I think that may come to somebody else's mind of like, yeah, but what about this issue? So I wanted to speak to that.
Thank you, Andy. Absolutely. Do you have experience in your communities, or you as in the industry when you were working there? Do you have experiences of school closures and the impacts it's had, maybe personally on you or people you know?
Yeah, actually. So again, in Southwest Colorado, Montezuma Cortez School District is where my boys are going to school. I was a teacher administrator for 9 years in the district years ago. The district, for very similar reasons, right? It's not sustainable. We can't. There was staffing issues. I mean, there was a myriad of reasons as to what was leading up to this point. Me having an education background, I try to see it from both vantage points, right? It's not always just the they're not listening to us. It's like, well, they have extenuating circumstances that the public probably is not aware of, right? But short answer is absolutely yes. The elementary school that I was raised in and that I taught in the last few years was closed this last year, and it was a sad day. It really was a sad day.
What was the impact on the community?
I would love to say I have a real good finger on the pulse of that. I really don't, because I've been out of the district as long as I have, and my boys are well past elementary. I did have some friends that taught there that were either displaced or moved around or went to another district. So it was and I'm sure that, so that's very much removed from the actual act of shutting down a school. I'm sure there were many students and parents that were heartbroken, that had to go, had developed relationships with their teachers and their administrators, and now they're having to be, plucked and gone to another school that they don't know anybody in their 4th or 5th grade year. Absolutely. So yeah, it broke my heart. It really, really did.
You're right, and schools are often seen at it's not their scene. They are typically a central hub in a community. Right, it's
Absolutely.
where people go. It's where you see other parents. It's where your kids play together. It's where these friendships and relationships are developed. And so when we see school closures happening, and like, again, it's all over the state.
Yeah.
When we see that happening, it accelerates the life cycle of a community into decline.
Right. Wow.
And that's why it requires a community impact, a collective work between foundations, between nonprofit organizations, between the district itself, between for-profits, to come in and find a holistic response to these issues that is uniquely tailored to the problems, to that context within that community.
Exactly right. Yeah. I mean, if it's not tailored, it's not going to work, is really the the long and the short of it. So I completely agree. Time flies when you're having fun. I wish we could go on for another hour, but listeners have other things to do. So let's kind of shift into the next gear here. We were talking before that I mentioned that we do a grab bag question, right? All of our listeners do a grab bag question. You were a little nervous about this. I promise it's not going to be bad. But let's see which one you get here. I've got these fancy little things out here. Where are we at? Oh, that's not what I wanted. Media play. Oh, there we go. Hold on. Sorry, I want to make sure that I get the right piece here, because then, yeah, I got a little fancy wheel so we can spin to see which one you're getting. There we go. I'd switched gears. That's why it didn't work. There we go. Okay.
Wow,
so
look at that.
I know, right? It would have been cooler if it worked the first time, but it still works. Here we go. All right. Which one of our 20 questions are we going to get you? Question number 9. All right. Question number 9 on the list on our grab bag questions is how do you think education has changed the most you began your career? And then a follow-up, how is it similar? So the first one, how do you think education has changed since you first started about 20 years ago?
Wow. So this doesn't include me as an actual student, because dinosaurs are no longer a part.
Oh, come on now.
I would say how it's changed the most. Can I give 2 answers?
Sure, go for it.
Technology.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
And the inclusion of technology in education and development of curricular resources, and then 2, and this is a little more political, but the expectations of schools and school districts has increased substantially. We see that with a number of legislations or policies
Sure.
over the last 10 years, even with educator effectiveness and others. And now we're getting into social emotional learning.
Right.
So the job for educators has grown more and more and more. And after working at Regis University in teacher education and at Jones International University, I will also say that those expectations are also increasing for student teachers, right? So the pipeline is drying up on both ends, right? It's more and more, it's harder to be a teacher, 1, to get licensure, and then 2, just to do your job.
Yeah, I completely concur. I have an awesome cousin that she's in her first year of education, and my goodness, listening to all of the, I wouldn't say hoops, they are necessary, right? But I mean, she's doing student teaching stuff in year 2, not year 4, and she's got to get so many hours, and there's all of these, and it is, I think, all based in the right, the heart is right, but my goodness, that's a lot to expect a 19-year-old kid to be able to just dive in there and do that. And then to your point, like when they get in the classroom, and I think this has always been the case, but I think the degradation of just society, for lack of a better term, more of the responsibilities of parents are then put on educators, right? They may not have a mom or dad at home. So, Mrs. Jones is mom, aunt, grandma, shouldn't be that way. But unfortunately, I think that is the reality in so many situations.
And then I would say something that's remained the same is, the passion, the love from our educators. They know in their core that the greatest impact you can have on a student is in the classroom level, right? Regardless of the administrators, regardless of the policies,
right?
The same thing, regardless of the technology. It is about those connections with that classroom teacher that has the highest correlation to student learning. It's been that way forever.
Right. I love that. That is, I could not say that better myself. I love that. That's perfect. All right. Final piece here. We're going to do 3 key questions. All of our guests get the same questions here. So we're going to just jump through those and see what Mr. Archuleta says here. All right. So question number 1, Daniel, who is the leader that you most admire and try to emulate?
There are so many.
Right.
The most recent one on my mind is someone I actually talked to
earlier today
for a few hours. It's a mentor of mine.
Okay.
Her name is Jennifer Molden, and she was the associate dean I worked under at Regis University. Why I tried to emulate her? What's that?
Molden?
Mauldin.
All right. I'm glad I asked. Malden. Got it.
Yep. And the reason why I try to emulate her is because then I was young, I was starting a new family, and what she taught me is that you can't just manage from an authoritarian, cold place.
Wow.
It's a human preoccupation.
Right. Lead from the heart.
Yep.
I love it. All right. Grab that guy. All right. Question number 2. What learning has most impacted you in the last year? That could have been a conference, a book, a chance meeting that you had with somebody. What do you think impacted you the most in the last year?
I would say it's this work through declining enrollment through Denver
Okay.
Public Schools. I mean, it's really the reason why I'm doing everything that I'm doing right now. I would say in addition to that, recently it was the CASB conference, because I had the opportunity to speak to so many school leaders from rural settings,
Mm-hmm.
and to hear their perspective on this it has opened up my eyes.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. And I'm sure you know this, and we've talked about this before, of just solutions have to be tailored to the specific community. How that works in a rural setting is very different than it would work in a suburb or an urban place. Absolutely. Makes perfect sense. Yep. Love it. All right. And our last question here, per the name of the podcast here, how would you empower learning for future generations? I'll give you unlimited wealth. You do your thing, Daniel. How would you empower learning for future generations?
I would do it through, and what I'm trying to do right now, by trying to empower school districts to fulfill their mission. And that
Okay.
is simply just to educate their students, right? Our kids.
Our districts to do their mission. Yeah.
Yeah. Our teachers to fulfill their mission to educate kids. Everything. It's just, if that is the mission of the public educational system within our state at least.
Mm-hmm. Love it. I love it. I love it.
Let's help them fulfill that mission.
There you go. There you go. Daniel, anything, I 2 final questions here. Anything that maybe we didn't cover that you'd like to just kind of leave our listeners with? Any final thoughts that you'd like to just get out there?
Why? So as I had mentioned earlier, and this isn't necessarily a sales pitch, but as I mentioned earlier, this work is from the heart right now. So if you'd like to check, if your listeners, viewers, subscribers would like to check out our website, surpassingdistinction.com, to see how maybe directly you can sponsor this specific work, or even indirectly look at the spectrum of services that we provide to organizations through business services, grant writing, data, research evaluation, accountability systems, continuous improvement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I lost my little image. I would have brought that up again. So I'll put that in the show notes, make sure everybody has that as well. So Daniel, thank you so much for your time. I sincerely appreciate it. I wish you Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, New Year's, the whole shebang, and appreciate the time, man.
Andy, thank you so much. This has been quite the pleasure, and I wish those all things to you and to all of your subscribers.
Appreciate it. Have a good one. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.